Hey everyone, Jason Emerson here with Inside Cool Music Magazine, where we bring you compelling stories from authentic musicians. Today I am speaking with composer and TV film orchestrator Jonathan Beard and director and editor Stewart Schill. And we are going to discuss a fascinating project coming up soon. It is a one-act electroacoustic opera called Cesare, Child of Night, which will premiere via live stream on Halloween, presented by Opera UCLA. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks so much for having us.
Stewart, I like that you have it right behind your shoulder there.
That's I pulled that up on my editing system here for
Now, Cesare, Child of Night, which took me a minute to, I was in my head, I was saying Caesar, but that's not correct.
Actually, we've been pronouncing it Cesare, correct?
Cesare.
Right. So yeah.
Cesare. So see,
slightly different
accent. Wrong. Cesare, Child of Night. I apologize. That is based on the 1920 German silent horror film, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. So this upcoming opera, with the music composed by Jonathan and directed by Stewart, the opera utilizes footage from the original silent film, which has been re-edited to accompany the revised narrative, and then creatively intercut with a series of 15 original paintings by the artist Sofia Sadaf, if I pronounce that correctly. And these all depict each of the opera's tableaus. Now, one thing I found fascinating, how the opera is described in on the website and in some press I found, says it is infused with varying forms of musical expression, including elements from early 20th century modernism and cabaret, a contemporary sound design, and asymmetrical electronic grooves. These expressions and designs are then woven with cinematic DNA into an adventurous orchestration, which percolates within the long and rich operatic tradition. Now, right there, that sounds incredible.
That's a great description. I don't know who wrote
Almost
that.
daunting.
Whoever wrote that, I want them on the team.
Exactly. Yeah, they've earned their money on that one.
Better than my goulash description.
That's musical goulash.
So briefly, can you explain how will this show be performed? Now, will this just be audio accompanying the movie and artwork, or will this be live performers on a stage with the video behind them?
Right. So the presentation is actually going to be fully recorded in advance. We've actually already recorded all of the singers and the live musicians, and it's all been mixed. So it's all ready to go. Basically, what the performance, so to speak, is featuring is a number of prominent UCLA faculty members, as well a couple of distinguished recent UCLA opera alumni. And particularly because of the pandemic over the last year and a half, we realized that we needed to pivot on how this piece would be presented. Opera UCLA, I believe, is putting on their first live opera in February now for the first time since the pandemic. But at the time that we were starting to set this up, it was completely open-ended and unknown when it would be possible for that to happen.
True.
So we came up with the concept for this type of a digital premiere, which is what a number of arts organizations have been doing over the last year. And that's where both the sort of recording component became really important, to essentially get the performances recorded first, because if we sort of look at the evidence over the last year, the types of performances that haven't gotten great audience connection and engagement in the digital space is just what looks like a filmed version of a live stage performance. If that's it kind of, there's a disconnect. So really making use of this medium to present something powerful in this medium. And that's where Stewart's immense talents then came into play as well.
Fantastic. So how did that work, Stewart, for you, from your end?
Well, it was definitely a unique project for me. Jonathan and I have a pre-existing relationship. He scored my last two films, and we had a great collaboration on those projects and became really good friends. And then he mentioned, actually, he's been mentioning to me for the last couple of years that he's been working on this opera, which always sounded really intriguing. And I, being a fan of Caligari, Dr. Caligari, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which has been noted as the very first horror film, 1920. So I was always intrigued. And then when I guess, now sort of learning the backstory that because of the pandemic, it became focused on the recording and the film, marrying the film to the recording. So that's where I got involved. And it's just been a really fascinating endeavor and experience. So this film, which has, is a gorgeous film, noted, for its German expressionistic sets and design, and it's already such an important historical film. Then to take that and sort of deconstruct it and reimagine it and adapt it to Jonathan's opera, and as he said, a fully realized recording, a beautiful recording, which not only has all these operatic elements, but Jonathan is so brilliant at incorporating all these interesting sounds and electronic elements, and the kind of elements that I respond to in his film scoring work were evident here as well. So then taking the film and reimagining it, because his opera veers in some ways, or emphasizes different elements of the story in the movie. So that became the challenge. And it was really interesting to tease out different elements from the movie. But what was really interesting, and Jonathan and I realized very early on, was that the style of acting in 1920, which is very theatrical and melodramatic, especially to our eyes now, was so well suited to the opera. It just instantly, it made total sense. So that was a really fun process.
That's neat. Yeah, I was watching the film today to refresh. I haven't seen it in, who knows, 30 years maybe or more. So I was watching it today, and it is fascinating. Yeah, it's just so many dark shades, strange lines, strange curves, like rooms look a little strange, the huge makeup. Yeah, it's really fascinating. But from a modern sensibility, the music in it is a little strange. It seems upbeat. It doesn't seem, as a layman myself, to almost fit this horror genre. And so I'm fascinated. I can't wait till Monday to watch how you all have changed this around. So how did this idea come to be? Did Jonathan, did you have this same thought of watching the movie and thought that maybe a different score, different take on it could kind of bring out some different aspects of the movie?
Sure. It's interesting. The whole process kind of started with the librettist Michael Kramer, who is a huge fan of the film as well and has taught it numerous times in his professorial career. And he sort of brought the idea of doing this as a stage work. And we went back and forth over a number of years. Basically, this is a project I've lived with for a while, but sort of over a number of years of how cinematic should it be, how tied to the movie should it be, not knowing back then at the time, of course, that world circumstances would create a situation where it made sense for it to be extremely tied to visuals from the movie. But those are conversations that we kind of had back and forth. The other thing that's interesting about, since it being a silent film, there are actually numerous versions of the score for it that exist out there in the world.
Because
it's
why I was interested when you said you were commenting on the music. I was wondering which score you had heard.
Yeah, because
it was on Tubi, which is free. So I
sure, and the film's in the public domain now, and so right. I suppose anyone could go and try and score this film.
Okay.
But there are a handful of versions that have gotten official releases, and with varying degrees of approach in how they score the film. In this case, it's kind of the reverse of certainly any way I've ever worked before in a cinematic context, because I wasn't thinking of it with that part of it forward looking to begin with. But it reminds me of sort of some anecdotes of concert composers in the 20th century as film was really becoming this strong medium. Stravinsky sort of dabbled in the idea of maybe scoring films. Schoenberg almost, and Shostakovich actually did score a number of films. Prokofiev scored some films. So, but a question that has infamously come up at times is a composer asking if the film could be recut to just match their music,
Right.
And I am familiar in the modern scoring era of basically only one anecdote of that really happening, which was John Williams conducting the flying scene in E.T. in the 1980s, and they turned off the projector at some point, and he just conducted it at his natural tempo, and Spielberg loved it so much that he actually slightly recut that scene to fit the music. But it basically never happens.
Right.
In this case,
much more the other way, which is, can you
exactly.
please redo the cue to fit the new edit? Yeah,
exactly. That's the direction it goes 999 times out of 1,000 at least. And in this case, we had an opportunity to completely do the opposite, and that is, it's an experience I never imagined I would have. Is working with a director and editor of this caliber, taking this footage and saying, how can we use this footage to tell our musical story? I mean, that's just a pretty darn awesome place to be.
And that's just what made it really interesting for me too. I was just thinking though, just anecdotally, like, Jonathan delivered to me before. It was so interesting. I don't think I even realized the whole genesis of how this came about until, recently, that originally it was intended to be a stage play, and now it became a movie. But he delivered to me a very, finished, polished piece of music, an excellent recording. And because Jonathan is so specific about all the different sounds that he uses, I mean, it's not just orchestral. I mean, really, there's electronic sounds, and really very conscientious about, the recording. So, I offhandedly mentioned at some point during the process, like, I was thinking, maybe of adding some sound effects. And he was like what? What were you thinking? It's very specific. So I really funny. Respect that about his process.
It's funny. We had locked music. Normally the composer just is begging for locked picture, which never arrives.
Right, this is so flip-flop.
We have locked music. So that was really a fun experience.
So then how did you work in the artwork into the movie to match with the music? Did you just have to keep trading things back and forth, or were you like Zooming or on the phone working together?
That was a challenge.
Yeah.
So I'll let Stewart answer the sort of technical elements of how he's ended up weaving it together, because he had pretty carte blanche with that. But I'll give a touch of background to how the paintings came to be. Mm-hmm. So Sofia Sadaf had worked with me on a previous project. Actually, I had an instrumental album called Ritual that actually came out earlier this year. And for each of the 5 pieces on that album, I had basically an artist from some other medium had come in and created a collaborative accompanying work in their medium of expression. And Sofia, being a painter, had painted a few paintings inspired by one of my pieces. And I just fell in love with that, and we became friends. And so when we were figuring out the sort of visual and cinematic approach of this presentation, we realized, before even getting into it, and this is before Stewart and I were even having really serious discussions about sort of how to weave it together, it became apparent early on that fully just trying, having nothing that was our own, no sort of original creative elements that tell our story sequentially, would be a potential challenge. Certainly, if we're telling the same story but with very different emphasis, as Stewart mentioned, and with a very different pacing. And so there was probably, some characters get switched around, some characters have disappeared entirely. There's probably going to be some areas where it's, hard to depict in just using this 100-year-old footage, kind of our approach. And so Sophia, I just kind of ventured with her, and originally I was going to just ask for, one or two paintings to help us sort of set some scenes. And she basically said, why don't I do 15 paintings and set all the scenes?
Wow.
And then you can basically, you can draw on that anytime you need to help set the stage for our story. And so that's kind of where it all started. And then Stewart, I'll turn it over to you in terms of how you decide to implement it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was definitely a process. And so, yeah, Sophia did her very impressionistic interpretations of Jonathan, each of the movements or pieces in this opera. And they're very impressionistic, very colorful. And at first I looked at those and I was like, it seemed very jarring to me, contrasting this black and white footage with these very colorful impressionistic paintings.
Sure.
And so what I ended up doing and ended up working much better than at first I thought they would is, and also this also touches on what I did with the film to adapt it to Jonathan's story. So for instance, in Cesare, Child of Night, as opposed to the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Jonathan and Michael really emphasized Jane's story. There's a love triangle implied in the movie, which is not necessarily the focus of the movie, but much more illustrated in the opera. And Jane has an aria. I don't know if I'm using these terms precisely, but she has like a 5-minute aria in the middle of the piece, which really had no, corollary in the movie. And so that's an instance of where Sophia's paintings, really helped take us into this different world. Now we're in a colorful world, and we're seeing a different dimension of this story. So taking the film, and like I said, it was, for me, it was almost like a deconstructionist kind of thing, because I respect that movie a lot, but I had to divorce the movie from itself and get very manipulative really with the footage. And I used it was really a fun creative process to use a lot of different techniques, adding a lot of movement, changing the speed of things. Sometimes we go into negative imagery. And so within that context of experimentation and, stating right at the beginning of the piece that you have to accept this world that we are presenting. And so within that context, the paintings ended up kind of integrating really beautifully. And like I said, I was surprised how well it worked. And it really did. And so having Sophia's paintings really added another dimension. That was really great.
Jumping off on something that Stewart brought up there, I think actually, as Stewart was talking, I was just thinking of the word textures a lot, because on a lot of different levels, there's a luxuriating in textures in this piece that we've created. And it's not just, so you've got textures of this old sort of sepia tone film footage. You've got these vibrant textures of Sophia's paintings. But there's also like a luxuriating in emotional textures in the piece as well. So in terms of pacing, like our story is much more streamlined. It's quite compact, and the piece overall is only 35 minutes long. But within that, there's an emotional luxuriating in the relationships that doesn't get emphasized as much in the original horror film. So Stewart mentioned Jane's kind of, more prominent placement and emotional interactions. The story is told from the perspective of Cesare, the somnambulist killer. So he's the one character who breaks the fourth wall, and he sings directly to the audience at the beginning and at the end. And you get into like his feelings, which are not explored particularly strongly in the film either. And so there's that sort of just like textural element happening on all these levels as well, that my hope is it'll be really compelling and congealing when folks are watching it.
Yeah, and what was interesting too is, I would say also that it has the opera has a very modern sensibility, and it was interesting the juxtaposition of this 100-year-old movie with this modern sensibility. And as Jonathan and I were working together, I kept asking him, like, well, if we were seeing this on stage, what would we be seeing? And because we were adapting the film, the principle, the sort of guiding principle was, it doesn't have to make literal sense. It has to make emotional sense. And it was, again, like pleasantly surprising how well that guided us, how well that worked. So sometimes there is a disconnect between what you're seeing and what you're hearing, but emotionally it makes complete sense, at least to me.
Nice. And I like how you're bringing this up into the 21st century of incorporating all these things, especially this, as it was stated here, this 20th century musical style. And you are getting some really interesting sounds. And I read somewhere where you say, Jonathan, you like experimenting with different timbres. So how did you get some of these sounds using digital tools? I know it's a mixture of kind of digitally created music as well as acoustic instruments. And
well, this was my favorite part of this process for me. I like to refer to myself as a timbre head when I don't have my electroacoustic composer hat on, like in this piece. I work a lot as an acoustic orchestrator in film and TV, as you mentioned at the top. And the thing that those two worlds have in common is that you're dealing with timbre. You're dealing with colors of sound, how to make them work, how to combine them, how to put them together. So in this one, if I'm orchestrating a film, my job is to be focusing on the acoustic orchestra most of the time. And so that is a defined sandbox. On this one, it's like the sandbox was however big I wanted it to be in terms of my own composing interests and my own sort of sound design creative interests. So what I could touch on some of the sort of compositional influences a little bit. There's bits of cabaret. There's elements of sort of, some of my favorite 20th century composers' styles, but kind of reimagined through my own lens. In terms of building the ensemble, so to speak, of this piece, it's scored for 7 live players and then a bunch of sound design. And for the electronic sound design, some of that is analog hardware electronics like Moog synthesizers from the 70s and things with knobs and switches that you can twiddle and make unworldly sounds happen. And then some of it makes use of even more contemporary sound design tools. So, and that's where the digital and virtual instrument stuff comes into play. So one of the things I was able to do was do field recordings of certain elements in the modern world and then repurpose them to create usable musical instruments. I did, for a good chunk of time while I was working on this, there was a large construction project going on across the street from my studio. And I did some sampling, essentially, some getting field recordings of construction site sounds that I could then edit and turn into musical instruments. So there's sort of, there's like, I forget what I called it when I was working. It's like my horror marimba or something, but like there's this, there's this marimba-like sound that is basically made up of the combination of the sound of a chain link fence rattling and the sound of a hammer on a metal pipe. And combining those together, I could build a digital sort of instrument that kind of works the way you might use a marimba, a percussion instrument that has pitch, but a very sort of short decay. Except it's this otherworldly, slightly horror-y marimba by the time I'm done with it. There's another sound that was made up of like the sound of a bike wheel that's squeaking combined with something from the construction site. So those types of things played into it. Then I could also take recorded elements of the piece. So I pre-recorded little bits of the instrumental parts in advance of us actually finishing the whole opera. And then could, reverse those, slow them down, speed them up, mangle them in different ways so that you're hearing acoustic DNA from this music now repurposed as electronic material. So all of that's present.
Wow, that's fascinating. This seems very, as I said, very 21st century. Was this difficult for both of you because you have something previously existing that you respect, but you are altering it also out of respect? Was that more difficult, or was it almost easier than when you create in your respective fields, you create things from scratch as you typically do?
I'll go first, I guess. Yeah, so in regards to this particular property, to use a contemporary term, I've lived with this I've been composing on this on and off for 5 years. It's been the passion project that I've returned to in between, when I've had little bits of time between my other professional commitments. And in that time, I haven't spent a lot of time with the original source material anymore. Obviously I watched the movie a lot when we were setting up to do this, and when Michael was delivering his libretto and we were trying to sort of refashion it to work as an operatic piece that could be about this length. But once we got those parameters set, I basically stepped away from the original source material, kind of like you would if you were, I don't know, adapting something else. If there's some either famous fairy tale or something that you're adapting, at some point you're going to step away and say, this is my version now that I'm doing, and I've done my homework. I've done that sort of background prep. And from here, I just want my own ideas to start to come out and take center stage. So for the last few years, I haven't focused on the movie much at all. And it was funny when we got into working together, Stewart and I, there were literally like moments I forgot, oh yeah, that's in the movie. Because I hadn't thought about it for a long time. So so that was that version of the process for me.
Also, because I guess you weren't expecting that it was going to be married back to the movie, right? You thought you had probably more latitude than we did. As for me, I mean, it's a short answer. No, it was not difficult for me to, manhandle this movie and feel free with it. My day job is editing. I do, I work primarily as an editor. So for me, this was largely, an editing exercise and how creative can you be with this footage? And that's what made it exciting and fun and artistic. So again, with respect to the movie and with all respect to, its role in film history and everything, it was very fun to, as I say, kind of deconstruct it and use it in our own ways. And it's really interesting. Jonathan and I had a discussion about this. We loved the movie that Peter Jackson did about World War I, where he took this archival documentary footage from this same era and, slowed it down and colorized and did all this, unprecedented processing to it to make it feel very naturalistic. And it was revelatory. Like, oh my God, now we see this. We're so accustomed to seeing our, old footage like this being very jumpy and scratchy, whatever. And even just, processing it and slowing things down and adding movement and all, color or whatever, all these tools at our modern disposal, really makes you view the film through new eyes. And when you marry it to this beautiful music, like I said, it was really exciting how well it illustrated the score, the opera.
And how long did this take you? Jonathan said he worked on this for many years. Did it take you that long as well? Or probably not, I'm sure, because you had to have his part first before you get to yours.
And it was spread out. It was less time, but just spread out over many years. But
right.
Yeah, no, I only got involved in this a few months ago, and it was kind of a process. And the opera is only 35 minutes long, I believe. So I've been working on it for a couple months, and just really a joy. You know, like I said, especially as an editor, it's not often you get a chance to be so creative with material like this. So that was really fun.
That's great. So this premieres on live stream on Sunday night, October 31st on Halloween. So when the performance, when it is over, what do you want the audience to have experienced or felt when they click off? What do you hope people kind of sit back in their chair and say after it's over, or maybe say nothing?
Stewart, I'll let you take the first round of this.
You know, I think it's a really fun ride. I'll confess that I am not a big opera fan, not well versed in this world, and as someone who is not a fan of that, I found this completely compelling and very accessible, and the music is fantastic. The film, the imagery is really spectacular, and this new interpretation of it all, I think, is really a fun, gratifying ride. So that's what I would hope people would sit back and feel like that was really fun. And and you know what? The movie is still powerful too. I mean, this is a new spin on it, and Jonathan's score is very affecting, and there are, not terrifying maybe, but like it's really an emotional ride.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that because this piece incorporates a number of my musical passions in ways that people might not expect, I would hope that, sort of subtly some of that resonates, and it might not even be that all of it resonates, but that it would pull people in something that they recognize, that then just pushed their expectations a little bit farther, or pushed their receptive instincts just a little bit farther, because there are elements of sort of barroom cabaret, electronic music, operatic. I am a lover of the operatic tradition, and certainly that's within the context that all of this lives. Mm-hmm. But then blurring some of these lines between different musical worlds that mean a lot to me, if someone recognizes some of their own loves within bits of that, but it also then pulls them into experiencing a bit of musical style that they wouldn't normally gravitate to, that they wouldn't normally discover on their own, that would be very fulfilling for me, certainly. And then I think, sort of echoing what Stewart said, my hope is that they will leave with a sense of delight. Mm-hmm. This is a weird and crazy story that has lasted 100 years, and it's had an immense influence on filmmaking for sure. It's also an incredibly evocative story for stage, even though our stage here is the moving picture. And I would hope that audiences leave feeling a sense of whirlwind delight.
Fantastic. Well, this has been so interesting. Thank you so much. I am very much looking forward to this on Sunday. Now, for people who would like to watch this as well, where can they go online to view this live stream?
I think the safest place to find it would be to go to schoolofmusic.ucla.edu. And there, from the front page, it links to the event page. It will be a live premiere on the UCLA Herb Alpert School of Music's YouTube channel on Sunday at 8 p.m. So you can find it on YouTube that way as well, I'm sure.
Great. So then after Sunday, it'll be up on YouTube. So people who want to watch it again, or?
So Jason, I think you're getting a bit of a scoop here. They have not heavily publicized this, but I was just informed they will be leaving it up for some period of time. So if people miss the live premiere at 8 p.m. on Sunday, they can still visit it on the YouTube channel at their leisure afterwards for at least some period of time.
But you should watch it on Halloween. It makes
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
well, you have to watch it on Halloween. Yeah. Fantastic. And this is 8 p.m. Pacific time, correct?
8 p.m. Pacific, correct.
Because you're in UCLA. All right. Well, that's good, because then we'll all be done with trick-or-treating here. I'm on the East Coast, so we'll all be done, and we won't have to worry about people knocking at the door or anything.
There you go. It'll be a nice, sort of last late show before you go
Right.
to bed on Halloween.
Watch
Exactly.
Cesare. It's going to be great.
Lay in bed at night just with the music going through your head and the visuals of everything.
I want to say, again, as someone who's not super well versed in opera, this has like really memorable, hummable tunes. Like this score stuck in my head. It's really unique. It's really just all praise to Jonathan. It's
fantastic.
Thank you, Stewart.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both again so much. This has been really great. I appreciate you chatting with me and talking about this new thing. Best of luck on how this goes on Sunday and afterwards. If there's anything else you'd like to add, feel free. We always like to give people the chance to plug themselves. If you have any other, like your own personal website or any new projects coming out, please let our audience know right now after they've spent time with us. They want to know more about you both.
nothing to plug.
So the best way, easiest way to find me is at jonathanbeard.com. I'm on the regular socials to some degree here and there, but always through my website you can reach me and see some of the other things that I'm about. And yeah, I guess that's my main thing. The album that I had come out earlier this year as well, Ritual, is worth checking out if folks get a chance. Fantastic.
All right. And again, we were talking about Cesare, Child of Night, one-act electroacoustic opera, 8 p.m. Pacific time this Sunday. And as always, if you like what you saw here, please make a comment down below. And if you have any questions, hopefully we can pass those on to Jonathan or Stewart if they have any they'd like to respond. Check out our website, insidecoolmusicmag.com, and we're on all the regular social media channels as well. So again, thank you, Jonathan, Stewart. Thank you both so much for this. This has been great. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Good talking to you.
Thank you, Jason. It's a pleasure.